Good morning, Magic players. Today we have probably the longest game that will ever be on this channel. You know what's not long? Me telling you to check out my Patreon. On to the contestants. To shortcut this long episode, kind of, we're going to do this a bit different, with a contestant and a brief summary of their deck. Horacio Twirlstash has brought his only deck that he plays, Nicol Bolas the Ravager. This deck is a control deck, hell-bent on ensuring no creatures but his commanders stick around. It has a ton of disruption pieces, removal, and board wipes. It also has a wish board in case his game plan changes. Rule 0 exists, y'all. Kudzwi returns with Nethroi, Apex of Death. This deck is a graveyard combo-based deck, leveraging self-mill and entomb effects to put powerful pieces into the graveyard, which Nethroi reanimates. Kha'Zix introduced Mizzix of the Asmodeus today. This deck is a hyper-fast combo control hybrid deck that seeks to win through reducing his spell's cost just enough with his commander in order to combo out with a Ladman type effect to win. This deck is the purest and most powerful experiment he has crafted, with several win streaks off cameras to back up its power. Iron Eyes brings Snapdax, Apex of the Hunt. This deck is an aggro Voltron deck with a stack sub-theme, with spells that allow Snapdax to grow huge while removing any blockers. Not really much to say about this deck. Now that we've summarized the decks, let's get to the game. Let me know if you like this version better than the opening hands intro. Kha'Zix starts us off in this lengthy game of Commander. Kha'Zix plays an island, then passes to the plant thing. Kudzwi plays a command tower, then pays 1 to cycle Ash Barrens, finding a plains and putting it into his hand. Iron Eyes plays an Opal Palace, then also cycles Ash Barrens to find a mountain. Let's see if Horacio continues this ashy train as Iron Eyes passes. Horacio does not. Sad. He plays a crumbling necropolis instead, passing to the goblin, who also didn't cycle an Ash Barrens. Sad. Kha'Zix plays another island, then passes, biding his time until it is right to make a move. Kudzwi plays an overgrown tomb tapped. Iron Eyes drops the plains he cycled for last turn, then an arcane signet. He plays a shadow spear and passes. Horacio plays a mana confluence, then loses 1 from it to play a Swiftfoot Boots. Kha'Zix plays a command tower, then starts his offense, playing a
Dockside Extortionist.
He makes 3 treasures and passes. Sanctum of Eternity is played by the plant guy. He then plays a Stinkweed Imp. All done, he passes. Slow starts happen for a long game. Iron Eyes plays a mountain, then a Basilisk Caller. Horacio plays an Ancient Tomb as his land for turn. Kha'Zix plays a Fiery Islet, then his commander, Mizzix of the Asmodeus. I wonder where the design of Kha'Zix came from. After it resolves, Iron Eyes casts a Swords to Plowshares, trying to stop the deck while he can. Kha'Zix uses 2 of his treasures to cast a Negate, countering the swords. In response, Iron Eyes casts a Thrill of Possibility, discarding then drawing. He doesn't find a response, so Sword is unfortunately countered. Or fortunately, if you swing that way. Huffing a bit, Kha'Zix passes. Kudzwi plays a Plains, then continues the Kill Mizzix theme with a Mythos of Nethroi, targeting Mizzix. As always, Kha'Zix has a response. He pulls a Chain of Vapor out of his ass and casts it, targeting Mizzix. Kha'Zix isn't the only one with a card up his ass, as Horacio casts a Force of Will for free, countering the chain. Mythos of Nethroi then resolves, yeeting Mizzix into the Shadow Realm, or the Command Zone, if you swing that way. Stinkweed Imp then pokes Kha'Zix for 1 damage, and Kudzwi passes. Iron Eyes plays a Swamp, then summons a snappy one, Snapdax. The Dinosaur Cat Nightmare Beast Thing Cat enters with a 1/1 counter from Opal Palace. Horacio plays a Scalding Tarn, then cracks it and loses 1 to find an Underground Sea. He then loses 3 from his very painful lands to cast his commander, Nicol Bolas the Ravager. Each of his opponents discards a card, with Kudzwi notably discarding an Elesh Norn. Horacio equips his Swiftfoot Boost to his commander and passes. Kha'Zix starts off the turn with an island, then casts Mana Severance, exiling all but a few lands from his deck, thinning it out so he can only draw gas from here on out. A very risky play, one that surely won't backfire. Kudzwi casts a Resurrection predictably, bringing Elesh Norn back and effectively locking Kha'Zix out of the game. He swings the now swole Stinkweed Imp at Kha'Zix for 3 damage, plays a Swamp, then passes. Iron Eyes mutates Vulpikeet onto his commander, allowing it to deal 4 damage to Stinkweed Imp. The Catman using a cat deck gains 4 cat life. Shadow Spear then gets slapped on a big cat thing and it heads at Kudzwi, dealing 8 commander damage and giving Iron Eyes 8 life. Horacio starts off his turn by losing 3 to his painful lands to cast a Crux of Fate. He destroys all non-Bolas creatures, the whopping 2 of them. Bolas then smacks Iron Eyes for 4 commander damage. All done, the turn shifts to the Goblin. Still meticulously plotting, Mizzix plays probably his last island, then a Talisman of Creativity. On his turn, Kudzwi casts an Abzan Charm, drawing 2 and losing 2. He plays a Phyrexian Tower as his land for turn. Iron Eyes plays a Skithiryx, the Blight Dragon, hereby now known as Skittles. Everyone pauses to glare at the Catman. Not the time for a threat like this. Iron Eyes flips them off and passes. Horatio takes 2 damage from his Ancient Tomb to play a Rakdos Signet, then another 1 from his Mana Confluence to play a Necropotence. He pays 4 life to set aside 4 cards, then adds them to his hand as he passes. Mizzix does nothing, awaiting an opportunity to strike. Kudzwi does the same thing, drawing and passing. Iron Eyes plays a Plains, then slaps a Shadow Spear onto Skittles. It goes at Kudzwi, who casts a Back for More in response. Elishnorn returns to play, fighting Skittles. With his 2 power nerf to Skittles, Elish is able to kill it, so Iron Eyes regenerates it. Elishnorn gets 3 Negua encounters placed on it, from the Infect. Horatio plays out Grixis Panorama, then taps his Confluence and his Tomb to flip his commander. The newly flipped Walker upticks to draw Horatio 2 cards. Nothing else to do, he passes and discards down to hand size, exiling the cards he discarded. Mizzix does nothing again, waiting for the Elishnorn to leave play. Kudzwi dredges Stinkweed Imp instead of drawing for turn. He mills 5 and returns it to his hand. Kudzwi then casts his commander, Nethroi. It enters and Kudzwi ships the turn. Iron Eyes plays an Azra Oddsmaker, then goes directly into combat, discarding a card and targeting Skittles with his ability. The dragon then goes at Kudzwi, connecting and giving the plant dude 3 poison counters. Iron Eyes draws 2 from the Oddsmaker's ability, plays a Nomad Outpost tapped, and passes. Horatio starts off by uptaking Bolas, drawing 2. He plays an Underground River, then taps his Mana Confluence for a God Pharaoh's statue. Now everyone glares at him. Horatio passes and his opponents lose 1 from the statue. Mizzix draws and passes, not being able to do anything with the statue on board. Kudzwi drops a Death's Oasis, then sends Nethroi at Bolas, dealing 5 and gaining 5 life. All done, he passes. Iron Eyes plays and cracks a Bloodstained Mire as his land for turn. He loses 1 and grabs a Swamp. He then discards a card to Azra Oddsmaker's ability, then swings Skittles at Kudzwi again. The plant guy withers to 3 infect counters and Iron Eyes gains 3 life from the spear. He then draws 2 from Azra's Oddsmaker's ability and passes. On his turn, Horatio attempts to cast a Jokohops. Of course he did. Mizzix, in response, casts a Disallow, countering the spell. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief except for Horatio. Horatio then downticks his Walker to blast Elishnorn for 10 damage. The statue then triggers on end step, pinging his opponents for a single damage. Woo. Mizzix draws and passes. Elishnorn gone, but the statue still present. Kudzwi plays a Stinkweed Imp again, then sends Nethroi at the Bolas Planeswalker, killing it and giving the plant guy 5 health back. Iron Eyes cycles a Savia Crystal in his main phase, not liking that he got it. He then mutates a Necropanther onto the Azra Oddsmaker, simply bringing the crystal right back to the field. Oddsmaker triggers on entering combat and Iron Eyes discard a card, targeting Skittles with his ability. Skittles goes at Kudzwi again and the Azra Panther goes at Mizzix. Skittles is blocked by the Stinkweed Imp, who apparently has flying. 3 infect counters still go through, however. Azra Panther connects with Mizzix, dealing 3 damage. He regenerates Skittles after combat damage is dealt, draws 2 cards, plays a Blood Crypt, and passes. Horatio plays a Mountain, then in Bolas' clutches, stealing Skittles from Iron Eyes. At end of turn, he then refills his hand by paying 3 life into Necropotence. His opponents lose 1 from the statue again. Mizzix does his thing, drawing and passing, attempting to sculpt the perfect hand. Iron Eyes mutates Snapdax onto the Azra Oddsmaker, triggering its abilities. He returns a Swamp to play from the Necropanther and deals 4 damage straight to Kudzwi's face in a small misplay. Iron Eyes gains 4 life. Snapsra Oddspanther then heads at Mizzix for the crime of standing there menacingly. Mizzix loses 1 from tapping his Fiery Islet to cast an Evacuation, stopping the menacing 6 damage from hitting him. Iron Eyes then plays a Sacred Foundry, paying 2 life to have it enter untapped. He passes. Horatio does his thing and plays up Badlands, then loses 3 from his lands to cast a Time Stretch. He targets himself, obviously, taking 2 extra turns. He then loses 2 more life to draw from Necropotence. He forgets the statue trigger, however. On the first extra turn, he plays a Coffers, then a Mindslaver for the 2nd game in a row. He loses 3 again to activate it, targeting Mizzix for the 2nd game in a row. He passes to himself afterwards. On the second night of Christmas, Horatio gives me an Academy Ruins as his land for turn, god damn it. He then uses a ton of mana, losing 3 from his lands to cast Exsanguinate for 9. His opponents lose 9, he gains 27, bringing him out of the danger zone. He then proceeds to pay 4 life into Necropotence, then passes. To cut down Kha'Zix's near perfect hand, Horatio activates his own Necropotence, paying 1 life and setting a card aside. He then casts a Tail's End from Kha'Zix's hand to counter the trigger, but Pyroblast from Kha'Zix's hand, the Tail's End, removing as many counter spells from Kha'Zix's hand as he can. Since he had to pay 2 additional per spell, he doesn't have anything left to do afterwards, so he passes. Kudzwi plays a Ravelark, then a Swamp. Iron Eyes drops a Clifftop Retreat. The table then remembers a lot of Myth's Godfarer statue triggers, so they all just take 3 damage because it's a must trigger and not a may trigger. Misplays happen, y'all, and quite a lot of misplays happen this game. Iron Eyes replays Skithiryx, then slaps the Shadow Spear onto it. He pays double black to give Skittles haste. The dragon heads at Horatio, dealing 5 infect. Iron Eyes gains 5 and he passes to Mr. Mindslaver over there. Horatio plays his land for turn and island, and then plays another Nicol Bolas, dragon god this time. He downtakes his god to nuke Skittles right out of the game. He then loses 3 to his lands to cast the adventure half of Fae of Wishes. Horatio searches through his sideboard and pulls in Obliterate, putting it into his hand. Fae of Wishes is then cast. It enters and Horatio passes. Kha'Zix draws but surprisingly doesn't pass. Instead, he plays an island, then a Sensei's Dividing Top. He pays 1 to look at the top 3, then rearranges and puts the top on top of his deck. With a better draw engine going, he passes. On his turn, Kudzwi shocks himself with a Godless Shrine. He goes straight into combat, swinging Ravelark at Horatio. It gets blocked by Fae of Wishes. On his second main phase, Kudzwi casts Victimize, sacrificing Ravelark to return Avacyn, Angel of Hope, and Elesh Norn to the field tap. He then plays a Swamp, then another Stinkweed Imp. Wow. Kudzwi passes turn. On his main phase, Iron Eyes smirks. He activates Shadow Spear to remove Indestructible from all of his opponent's stuff. He then taps out completely to cast a Ruinous Ultimatum. The board wipe resolves and destroys most of the board, removing a ton of threats. Kudzwi's Death Oasis triggers, and Kuds mills 6, then returns Cavern Whisperer, Ashen Rider, and Ravelark to hand. On upkeep, Horatio casts a Limdol's Vault. He looks at the top 5, doesn't like them, and pays 1 life to look at the next 5. He likes those, so he rearranges the cards to his liking. He then draws for turn. As his land for turn, he plays an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. He activates his Cabal Coffers to add 12 black mana. He loses 2 from his painful lands to cast a Dark Intimations. His opponent discards a card and he returns Dragon God from his graveyard to his hand. He then cracks his earlier played Grixis Panorama to find a mountain and passes. Kha'Zix cackles a bit, then attempts to go for the win by casting a High Tide. Horatio also cackles, although a bit more evilly, and casts a Dream Fracture, countering the High Tide. Both players draw and Kha'Zix scoffs. He then does the top thing, uses Sensei Divining Top to look at the top 3, rearrange them, then puts the top on top and draw a card that is not a top. Kha'Zix passes angrily. Kudzwi plays a Carrion Feeder. He plays an Ash Barrens. He then casts Nethroi, mutating it onto his Carrion Feeder. Nethroi's ability triggers and Kudzwi returns Avacyn, Stinkweed Imp, and Viscerus here to play. He then casts a Return of the Wild Speaker, drawing 8 cards, then discards a few at end of turn. Iron Eyes plays a Heliod, God of the Sun, followed by his commander, Snapdax. He pays into Opal Palace, so Snapdax enters with 3+1/+1 counters on he, she, cat. Shadow Spear then goes on to the cat, giving it extra oomph. Horatio plays and cracks a Polluted Delta, losing 1 to find a volcanic island. He then taps his Ancient Tomb to activate Cabal Coffers, making 13 mana. He then casts his Return Dragon God, upticking it to force his opponents to exile some stuff. Horatio uses his Academy Ruins to return Mindslaver to the top of his deck and passes. Kha'Zix plays his top, then looks at the top 3 with his top. He then puts the top on top and draws a card from the top. Try saying this 5 times fast, or even normally. Ugh. Kudzwi plays a Wooded Bastion. Some odd plays happen here that I couldn't quite interpret from the video and audio, but a Cryptic Command is cast by Horatio, which gets copied from Kha'Zix's Insidious Will, who counters the original and draws a card. Nethroi and Stinkweed then head at Kha'Zix, dealing 6. That was the best of what I got out of the footage. Trust me, it was a mess of a play. Anyway, afterwards, Kudzwi casts an Ashen Rider, exiling Shadow Spear. He passes turn. Iron Eyes casts a Necropanther, then casts Insurrection, gaining control of all creatures. In response, Kudzwi casts a Windgrace's Judgment, blowing up Dragon God and Snapdax. He then sacrifices Ashen Rider to exile Academy Ruins, and sacrifices his commander to deny Iron Eyes the sacrifice ability. Insurrection then resolves with Iron Eyes immediately swinging all of his new creatures at Kudzwi. They all connect and Kudzwi takes 12 damage. Iron Eyes ships the turn to the evil future seeing guy, who is looking a lot more menacing as his turn starts. Speaking of Horatio, he immediately activates his Cabal Coffers to make a lot of mana. He casts and flips his commander in one move, then downticks the walker to reanimate Ashen Rider from Kudzwi's graveyard. It enters and Horatio exiles Avacyn with his ability. He then finally casts Obliterate. In response, Mizzix casts a Mystical Tutor, losing one to his Fiery Island. He finds a Swan Song and puts it on top. Obliterate then resolves and the board is obliterated. Content with his play, Horatio drops a City of Brass and passes turn. Out of options, Mizzix returns to trying to scoop the good hand. Kudzwi was lucky to draw a land. He plays and loses one to crack a Polluted Delta, finding a swamp. Iron Eyes plays a Rugged Prairie. Horatio uptakes his commander to draw 2 cards, then plays a Bad River. Mizzix draws and passes. Kudzwi plays a Temple Garden, paying 2 to have it enter untapped. He then casts a Sakura Tribe Elder, getting back into the game. Iron Eyes plays a Command Tower. Horatio plays a Swamp, then cracks his Bad River for a Bad Lands. He loses 1 from tapping his City of Brass to play a Gem of Becoming. He forgets to use his commander's abilities and passes. Evil, not smart. Mizzix does that thing, drawing and passing, that kind of thing, yeah. Kudzwi plays a Murmuring Bosk, then hits Bolas with Steve. Kudzwi then plays a Corpse Knight and passes turn. Iron Eyes plays a Plains, then an Aggravated Assault. Bolas is upticked on Horatio's turn, drawing him 2 cards. He plays and cracks a Prismatic Vista, losing 1 to find an island. He then casts a Control Magic, stealing Kudzwi's Corpse Knight. What a use for that card. Mizzix does the thing again, the earlier Mana Severance biting him back massively. At the end of his turn, Kudzwi cracks his Steve to find a swamp. Kudzwi casts a Polokranos Unchained on his turn and passes. Iron Eyes just plays the Luxon on Warhammer. Mizzix is jealous. Horatio draws 2 with Bolas, then loses 1 from his City of Brass to cast a Ruinous Path, destroying the Polokranos. All done, he passes. Mizzix draws, sighs, and passes. He's gonna be doing this for a bit. Kudzwi plays an Urborg, then has just enough mana to cast a Ravenlark again. Iron Eyes joins Mizzix in just drawing and passing. Horatio cracks his Gem of Becoming on his turn, grabbing a few lands. He plays one of those lands he grabbed, a Swamp. He then casts a Cyclonic Rift, losing 1 from his city, and bounces Kudzwi's Ravenlark. Mizzix draws and passes. His emotions can't be read, but he's probably sad. On his turn, Kudzwi casts a Heliod's Intervention, blowing up Horatio's Control Magic and getting back his Corpse Knight. He passes. Iron Eyes draws and passes. His emotions can totally be read. He is mad. Horatio plays an island, then a Consecrated Sphinx, losing 1 to his land. He then downticks his commander Bolas to reanimate Ashen Rider out of Kudzwi's graveyard again, exiling Corpse Knight. He passes afterwards. When Mizzix draws, Horatio draws 2. Mizzix passes. Horatio draws 2 as Kudzwi draws 1. Kudzwi plays a Cruel Celebrant and Iron Eyes perks up. He makes a deal with Kudzwi. If Kudzwi gets Horatio to exactly 4 or lower using Celebrant, Iron Eyes can finish Horatio off. Kudzwi agrees, very enthusiastic about knocking Horatio out. Kudzwi plays a Phyrexian Altar, then sacrifices his Cruel Celebrant to it, dealing 1 damage to each of his opponents and gaining 1, setting Horatio to exactly 4, which is what the 2 agreed to. Iron Eyes pays a red and a white, and casts a Boros Charm, dealing 4 directly to Horatio and knocking him out. Mizzix also brings up a deal. He says he will concede after one of the other 2, being Iron Eyes and Kudzwi, is knocked out as well so he can take 2nd place. They both shrug and Kudzwi passes. Iron Eyes plays a Wayfarer's Bauble, knowing he's clearly at a disadvantage. Since Horatio is out, Mizzix is up next. Mizzix sits back and relaxes. He's just watching the fight while still plotting his win. Kudzwi casts Ravenlark for the 3rd time this game, almost as much as Stinkweed Imp. He passes the Catman. Iron Eyes plays and loses 1 to crack an Arid Mesa, grabbing a mountain. He passes. Mizzix now has a full meal in front of him. Where did he get that? No one knows. Ravenlark goes at Iron Eyes for 4 damage in the air. He then sacrifices it to the altar and resurrects Feyburrow Elder and Polokranos from his graveyard. He then plays a Deadbridge chant, milling 10 cards into his already vast graveyard. Kudzwi passes, and Iron Eyes pays 4 to make a Cleric from his Heliod. Iron Eyes starts off the turn with a Disenchant, the white version of Naturalize. He targets the Phyrexian Altar. It blows up the artifact, and Iron Eyes cracks his bauble to find a swamp. Kha'Zix finished his meal and is now taking a nap. Wonder what he's dreaming about. Playing actual cards, probably. On upkeep, Deadbird's chant gives Kudzwi a plains back. He plays it, then mutates Nethroi onto Polokranos, reanimating Elvish Norn, Skull Prophet, Carrion Feeder, Sakura Tribarter, and Stinkweed Imp, of course. He then swings Nethrokranos and Fabro Elder at Iron Eyes, dealing 13. Kudzwi then passes, clearly in the lead. Iron Eyes casts Bedevil, killing Nethrokranos. Yay! Kha'Zix has disassociated into another timeline. What was in his food? I don't know. Deadbird's chant gives Kudzwi a spell I didn't quite catch on camera. It's okay, it wasn't a creature so it didn't go on board. He casts out Casualties of War, blowing up Iron Eyes' command tower, locks it on Warhammer, and Aggravated Assault. He then plays and cracks some Marsh Flats, losing one to find a Plains. All that he can swing goes right at the Catman, dealing 23 damage. Surely nothing can happen to his lead, right? Right? Iron Eyes casts Extinction Event. He chooses Odd and exiles quite a lot of creatures on Kudzwi's board. Not quite enough to save him, however. Kha'Zix finally wakes up, draws a card, and smiles. He passes turn. Kudzwi gets Abzan back from the Deadbird's chant, then plays a Swamp and Sun Titan. He returns Cruel Celebrant with his ability. He swings in just enough damage to knock out Iron Eyes. Kudzwi then looks to Kha'Zix, who raises a finger and asks to watch. Kha'Zix draws and plays an island. Finally, Kudzwi is in absolute shock as Kha'Zix plays a Soul Ring, then an Arcane Signet. He then reveals his hand, conceding and revealing that the game would have been his to win the very next turn. All he needed was a land. Kudzwi swings all of his board at the Goblin Genius to win the game.
This game will go down in history as the longest and most tense of the show. For now, Kudzwi's explosive Nethroi deck ruled the field from start to finish. I wish to see this continue next time on Wizards of the Vortex.